And I think we were having this conversation last week about, you were sort of saying about a lot of the other individuals and people you've spoken to as part of this series, very environmentally driven. And there's that sort of concern, we're coming in talking about building, which is a lot of what we do because it's about making places. And I think people's perception about climate change and making the world better, a lot of it comes down to, protection of the environment and all that sort of thing. But talking about, going back to your Harrington example, to reduce people's car usage, which is a huge, puts a huge pressure on, the carbon footprint, unless we actually design places that allow for less car usage, and this is only one small part of all of it, but that is such a big part of what we do. So that is where our role is so important in, what might be seen as the bigger things that would drive climate change and improving the natural world. But you need to think about all those interconnecting things as well.
Yeah, definitely.
And part of the reason, therefore, that starting afresh with a new settlement rather than extending places that have already grown too much, the benefit of that being that you almost take a bigger risk because you're probably looking at land that has a very low value but very little chance of gaining a planning permission or planning approval. And therefore, actually, because that land value is lower from the outset, it gives us the opportunity to do things properly, which we can't necessarily do on a site that has got like the hope value because it sits on the edge of a ring road adjoining a site that's just been approved. You're never going to be able to put in the infrastructure and the sustainability and the landscape space in that kind of site compared with something that is actually a bigger risk that gives you that chance to create a story and a narrative. And that's part of our role, I think, to think outside the box and say, okay, it would be much easier to put 500 houses here on the edge of Basingstoke. However, we could also look at doing X, Y, and Z and create something really special that's going to be a bit more of a risk, but it might change the way that people start to live or the way that they think about building new homes and new communities, which is exciting for us.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. Definitely is. Well, it's one of those things, isn't it? That's where people live, and people are going to have somewhere to live, and it's designing that well is really important. But it is a huge challenge. We were saying about perspectives and people's view of these things. I think people do realise that we need to readdress sort of the urban realm. We see it a lot now. With it, who is it? Insulate Britain, for example. A huge percentage, I can't remember the percentage, but it's a ridiculous amount of the UK housing stock is crap. And actually, is there an opportunity there to kind of look at it and go, well, do we just insulate the houses or do we actually look at that area as a whole? But then there's this real challenge of how on earth do you do that when everyone owns their own home? It sort of removes an aspect of sort of resilience there, which you could have if you were able to look at these things in a different way. But I think it's a problem with everything in a way as well, because we have a lot of, even on enhancement programs where we're not removing sort of areas which could be considered the environment and building on it. We've got a project where we're doing a lot of enhancement. We're restructuring part of a river, we're putting new wetlands in, we're improving the grasslands there to make them more diverse because they're very limited. And this is a project we've been involved with the council and with ecology companies and lots of consultancies going, actually, this area is really not very good. There's a huge amount we can do to enhance it, to protect the city from flooding, to make it more accessible for people to get out into the countryside. And we've sort of proposed this project. And when it started on the ground, we had people laying in front of the mowers and the machinery to do it, saying, we're here to protect nature. And it's like, well, actually, nature's so deprived that actually there's not really anything here. If you actually want to, we have an opportunity to enhance it, improving people's lives, the city, and nature. People, place, and nature. It's all about that, but people still don't understand that. They still very much see a tree being cut down as negative. Whereas, it's sad that tree's been cut down. It would be better if we could leave it. But if removing those few trees means we can create a whole new area of wildflower meadows and plant more trees elsewhere and create wetlands and things, it is a sacrifice that in my view is worth it. But it has to be done in a logical way, and we're not out there to do, make money from all these things and do all of this stuff. And it's the same with housing. It's an urban design. It's kind of, trying to find the best outcome for everybody and everything. And there's so much opportunity to do that, but people, they don't necessarily realise that those opportunities are there.
I think there is a huge lack of education around all that, and I'm just even taking it from a very small example from my 7-year-old son last week. We were driving along the motorway, and he just pointed out they've cut some trees down, and he was really upset by the fact that they'd cut some trees down. And of course, it's a glimpsed moment, and I couldn't really comment much on that, when maybe they were planting them somewhere else. But so clearly he's had this message told him that cutting down trees is bad. And of course, cutting down trees isn't good. But like you say, there are often vast other reasons behind that. This is not akin to deforestation, clearly.
Exactly, yeah.
Like you say, you can create even better environmental assets because you provide space for something else, or one may have been cut down and 10 have been planted elsewhere. But so even as a 7-year-old, suddenly there's this perception that this is bad, and I'm not advocating that it's good, but there's a missing link somewhere in what else actually could be happening.
Absolutely.
I'd guess it's probably not just education but communication. So it needs to come from both sides, doesn't it? From the public sector and into education.
That's it.
Yeah.
To all kind of walks of life, not just to kids. Obviously, they're the younger generation, so we need to kind of teach them properly.
That's it. Well, that's the trouble, I think, with the media at the moment, really, is you only really ever get one side of the story, and it's always, this is bad.
Yeah.
And there's no kind of explanation as to the challenges behind what's happening and the reasons behind it. And it's not a case of just yes or no. Actually, it's a huge mire of, caveats and, what's the word? I can't think of the word, but, where you sort of offset here and offset there and all that type of thing. It's never that simple, especially when it comes to the environment. It's very, very complicated, but because there's often so many people involved, so many things to consider. And, we get it all the time. And we had an episode with Dougal Driver, who's from Grown in Britain. And he was basically saying that, you look at a field and a farmer cutting the wheat, and the child comes home from his summer holiday, and they draw a picture, and it's of a farmer cutting some wheat in a field, and everyone goes, oh wow, that's amazing. And the next child comes in and draws a picture of a harvester harvesting the woodland next to it, and they go, oh my God, this is horrible. And then the mum sees it and she writes a complaint to the council saying they're cutting all these trees down. And actually, really, it's the same thing. Forestry is just, longer farming, basically, tree farming. But there's that kind of really misnarrative around all the benefits that those trees can provide and all this type of thing, and that wood's going to be used, But again, people are so disconnected, they don't necessarily understand that. And I think that's why we wanted to put this series together, is because there is so many sort of misconceptions out there, and people don't understand how and why we approach things and do things the way we do. We wanted to try and share that and share it, a more holistic view of the environment in general.
Yeah, the reality behind all of it.
Exactly, the reality of it, not just people there going, we need to save the environment, which we all obviously want to do. It's just there are a lot of challenges and reason and trade. That's the word I was looking for. Trade-offs. There's a lot of trade-offs in delivering. You might have to give something more here, give something less there, and you have to apply that over the whole area you're looking at, or whatever it is you're doing, policy or whatever.
It's a balance, isn't it?
Yeah, balance. That's the word. That's a better word.
And I think we've got a very romanticised view of farming in the UK. That it's that old traditional way of living, but it's not necessarily the case, is it?
Yeah. That's it. But then, again, I don't want to talk too much on the tree side, but, there is kind of this view that we just afforest everything. And it's kind of like, well, and again, on the farmer side, where on earth our food is going to come from? And it's far better we grow it here than we bring it in. And, we want a mosaic of habitats, not just trees everywhere. And again, that's something that people don't often understand. They think the UK was always forested, and actually it probably wasn't. It was a mosaic of habitats, which we lost, due to humans eating everything.
And so the balance of woodland, it's really important to maintain those woodlands and take out trees that are perhaps damaging other species, or to get more light.
Limiting the healthy ones,
Yeah, exactly. And letting light to the forest floor and all this type of thing. So, there's a huge range of things that need to be done there. It's just, as I say, it's not always something people are so aware of.